1910. A painter finishes a small watercolor. It is the first picture in the history of the world with nothing in it. No story, no thing you can name. Just color and shapes that are shapes of nothing. Every painting before it had been about something. This one refused on purpose. You stood in a museum in front of a canvas like that. Maybe you felt nothing. Maybe you felt cheated. So did I the first time. Over the next hour, I will show you why these paintings were made. Why the sharpest painters alive gave their whole lives to them. And by the end, you will be able to walk up to the one hanging near you. Then stand there until it finally does something to you. Look at it again. 1910, Wassily Kandinsky, and the caption underneath calls it the first abstract watercolor. On the level of paint, that is all it is. A few circles, formless shapes that lean and cross, blots of color sitting on white. Nothing on that surface is pretending to be a tree, or a face, or a road. But the paint is the small part. The real brick is underneath it. Kandinsky is the first painter to look at his own canvas and understand that there is nothing there. No scene, no moment, no thing. The picture is secretly about. He does not hide it. He leaves it without a title and calls it what it is, the first abstract watercolor. Because every painter before him had kept one thread back to the world. The Fauves came close, so did the Cubists and the Futurists. But look at what they actually painted. Here a couple is dancing. Here a train races past. Here speed itself and sound and the state of your own memory. Always a subject, hiding inside these shapes. So hold this. For the next 100 years, abstraction runs in two families, side by side. One is color and soft, drifting line. That is Kandinsky. The other is hard geometry, straight edges, flat squares of paint. That is Piet Mondrian. Two paths out of the same room. Keep the pair. And here's the strange part. You did not have to be a revolutionary to end up here. Take a painter who simply follows the logic of the last 50 years. From Impressionism on, one ism into the next. He arrives at abstraction anyway, not because he wants to burn anything down, because the road only ran one way. Stand in front of Claude Monet's water lilies. On the level of subject, fine, those are lilies on a pond. But cover the title and look only at the paint. Red and orange and green, laid on so thick the water dissolves. On the level of what your eye actually sees, this is already almost an abstract picture. Now Paul Cézanne and his Mont Saint-Évêque, a blue-gray peak above green hills. On the level of subject, it is still a mountain. But take one thing away, the line of the horizon, and the whole canvas tips over into abstraction. He thinks he is painting a mountain. What he is doing is half a step from a picture with no mountain in it at all. So when that little watercolor appeared, it did not come from nowhere. The door had been standing open for years, and the painters leaning through it were not dreaming of any revolution. Stand in front of a Rembrandt. The label says Descent from the Cross. You read it, you nod, you walk on. You just miss the painting. This is not a story about disciples lowering a body from the cross. It is Rembrandt telling you something the label will never carry. Every painting carries two things at once. There is the subject, what is shown, the words on the label. And there is the idea, the deep thing the painter reached for the subject to say. The subject you can name in a second. The idea you have to go and find. Here, the subject is a body coming down from the cross, but the idea is the humanity of God. Look at that body. It is heavy. It is ugly. The belly sagging. Hard to stand and look at. Rembrandt paints it that way on purpose. In every god, he wants you to see a man first. But that is not what happens in the room. You catch the subject, you check it against the label, you are pleased you guessed right, and you move on. You never went past the story. The idea, the thing he actually painted for, you left hanging on the wall. The painters notice this. The viewer always snags on the subject and never climbs to the idea. So by the early 1900s, one thought was getting louder and louder. Take the subject out of the picture. Take it out and keep only the essence of painting, color, paint, line, form. Make a person feel the idea instead of reading it. A subject belongs to theater, to cinema, to books. Never, they decided, to a painting. Painting is color and line and shape. Here's the part that changes everything. While the painters reached for this, psychology was proving them right. You can move a person, move the psyche itself with color, with line, with composition. The same tools painting already holds in its hands. Color and line reach you before a single word does. So, abstraction lets you lift the subject out without pain and leave only the layer that works on you directly. That is the whole self-worth of painting. As an art, it is the art of color, the art of line, the art of form, nothing borrowed from theater, just its own language. Stand in front of an abstract painting and you are not chasing a story. You are looking at the beauty of the picture itself and letting it get into you. So switch the reasoning off. Feel it first. Only afterward, ask how the painter walked you into that feeling. And the painters were already standing at the edge. Pablo Picasso's clarinetist keeps its figure, its subject, yet it is a breath away from geometric abstraction. Pacioni's footballer has a subject too, but as paint it is almost an abstract picture. In Dufy's still life, you can miss the bananas entirely and see only beautiful color moving. One step. That was all that was left. Some took that step slowly. Kandinsky did not jump. He tried Impressionism, then Pointillism, then fused Pointillism with Fauvism and pushed the color higher and higher until it carried him out into abstraction. Mondrian walked the same road from the other side, as pseudo-impressionism first, then pointillism, then cubism, and out of cubism straight into geometric abstraction. Two men, two routes, the same door. But why did they want the door at all? Because until the 20th century, art lived under a dogma, the dogma of style. Baroque and Classicism in the 1600s, Rococo and Neoclassicism in the 1700s. Rembrandt looks nothing like Velázquez, nothing like Rubens, and yet all three work inside the single paradigm of their century. And the ones who pushed hardest against it were told by public and critics alike that they were unworthy of the name master. So when abstraction arrived, for the painter it was a breath of fresh air, a breath of freedom. For the first time you could paint what you wanted, the way you wanted, answering to no dogma at all. And there was one more push. The world itself had grown complicated. Memory, consciousness, the psyche, emotion, imagination, speed, sound, abstract things, none of which had ever needed a picture before. Things this abstract ask for an art just as abstract to speak them. Abstraction was a consequence then, not the goal and not a painter's whim. So take the story out and keep only what strikes the nerve. But strike it toward what? That question sent the painter somewhere no one saw coming. By 1900, a church had lost the room. A philosopher had already written the sentence out loud, God is dead. And it had been coming for a while. All through the 1800s, religion kept discrediting itself, speaking a language the modern public no longer understood. So the old thread between a person and their faith was quietly coming loose. We have lost our compass, the thinkers said. The beacon has gone dark. So who walks into an empty room? The artist. And the artist of the early 1900s thinks he is a little more than an artist. He is a philosopher. He is a theologian, a scholar of religion, even a scientist. He means to look into the future and to get you ready for what is coming. So art picks up a heavy job. For some painters, it becomes the beacon itself, the moral compass people had lost. For others, it is the guide, the thing that leads you back toward God, or prepares you for a new kind of spirituality. Look at these three tall figures, pale against a dark ground, stretched upward like something trying to leave the body. But the goal was never a pretty picture. Abstraction was meant to work on you directly, to change the way you look at your own life. It aimed at the nerve, not the eye. and it was meant to lift you towards something higher. That very catharsis a person used to reach standing before an icon in a church. The jolt of the icon without the church. No more, no less. And you do not arrive there by reasoning. You cannot sink your way to God, only through an emotional rebirth, only by working straight on the psyche. You had to be remade, not persuaded. That was the whole wager. Feeling, not logic, does the lifting. So abstraction becomes a universal language, one painters learn from every side. On the level of pure form, it hands the artist total freedom. This is painting about itself. It points at nothing outside the frame. It is only itself. You stop reading and you start looking. At color, at line, at paint. Admire for what they are. On the level of style, something flips. The old grand styles were a collective we, a whole room of painters all working inside the Baroque. That we breaks apart into a single I. There's no abstraction now. There's the abstraction of Kandinsky, of Mondrian, of Kazimir Malevich, of Rothko. Each man his own. And on the level of ideas, abstraction can finally show what has no shape, the things that are invisible by their nature. God, the idea of faith, consciousness, speed itself. It strikes the viewer head on, and it carries the strain of an age being rewritten by science. To the people who believed in it, this was the road back to the spiritual, a way to paint absolute truth. So abstraction did not simply appear in the early 1900s and fade, because it hit the viewer directly, and because it could hold the weight of such a complicated age, it became the favorite language of painting, not a passing phase, but a habit the whole century kept. And painters are still reaching for it today. But long before any of this had a name, one man had already burnt his old life to chase exactly this. He was 30, and he walked away from a professor's chair. Wassily Kandinsky came to painting late. At 30, he turned down a professor's chair at a Russian university and left for Munich to learn to paint. A settled man with a settled career, and he walked away from all of it. That is a radical thing to do with a life. In Munich, he studied first at a small private school, then at the Academy of Fine Arts. For years, he lived between Germany and Russia. When the First World War broke out, he went back to Moscow, and he stayed there until 1921. Then he left again, thinking it was not for good. It was for good. In 1933, he settled in Paris, and there, in 1944, he died. Russia, Germany, France, a man of the world, and he felt like one. So why does a trained painter walk away from painting things? Kandinsky gave two reasons for it. The first is a painter's reason. For years, he chased one thing, the sunset hour over Moscow, the Kremlin walls, the gold of the light going down. But the sunset is not a point on a line. It is a process, and paint holds still. He painted it for decades and never got it. So he walked into the old Pinakothek in Munich to see how the great masters had solved the same problem, and what he found there broke him open. Not one of them had done it. Not one great master had used up the beauty and the sense of the natural world. Nature stayed undefeated. Stand in a park in autumn and you will see why. The gold of the leaves is richer than anything you could copy onto a canvas. So he stopped trying to copy. There is no point, he decided. The point is to push the colors, bend the shapes, change the whole composition until the canvas carries what you felt in that moment, not the weather that day, what you felt while you stood in it. Take one of his street scenes from the village of Murnau, hot yellows and reds, barely any blue, and you feel warmth, joy, a kind of wild calm. Now flood the same street with blue instead. It turns quiet, sad, lost in thought. The color is the feeling. That is reason one, the painter's reason. Realist painting cannot give you the world exactly, and it cannot give you the feeling either. But Kandinsky had a second reason, and it ran deeper. He believed a painting must carry an idea. Take Rembrandt's Return of the Prodigal Son. The story is a son coming home, but the idea is forgiveness, the father who pardons everything, the way God pardons everything, the way God pardons everything. And Kandinsky thought the story itself got in the way of the idea. Strip the story, he said, and keep the essence. But his idea would not sit still inside objects. It was too deep for things. In his own words, the Holy Spirit cannot be painted as an object, only without objects. That was his goal, to paint the streaming light of the divine. He did not go abstract because he could not do the other kind. He could. He has figurative work. He went abstract because the idea itself is abstract, and this is the oldest move in the icon. Nobody looking at an icon thinks Christ really looked like that. The figure is a sign, pointing past itself. So Kandinsky paints signs, angels, a mother and child, pointing at the divine. But Kandinsky went further than any of them. He did not just paint abstractly. He built a whole new system of genres. The old genres name what sits on the canvas, a face, a landscape, some trees. His name, something else, how you take the thing in, how you come to know it. First, impression. The picture closest to its source, a book, a concert, a thing he saw. His impression, one concert, is a Schoenberg evening turned into paint. You can still find the room in it, the black lid of the piano, the seated hall, and the yellow flooding all of it. That yellow is the music. For Kandinsky, every single sound had its own color. And Schoenberg's music hit him like a vital force, a mighty wave that wraps around everything and pours inspiration into you. Then improvisation. Free riffing on a theme, the way you let your own mind wander. And then composition. Pure invention, tied to no source at all, numbered like a symphony. A composition took 4 or 5 days to paint, but months of work stood behind it. He built these 3 painting kinds to hold all of it: impression, improvisation, composition. And the compositions were where he went hunting for the end of the world. Everyone thinks he splashed, that the paint simply fell where it fell. There is a drawing that proves the opposite. It lays out composition 7 before a single drop of color went down. Every line of force worked out in advance, like an engineer working out where a bridge will bend. Nothing you see on his canvases is an accident. All of it is calculation. Some days he set down 2 strokes or 3 and walked away. That is enough, he said. Now I have to think about where the painting wants to go next. So the picture grew the way a thought grows, slowly, mostly in his head. So how do you build a painting out of nothing? You start with something you can still read. Composition 6 began as a small painting on glass of the Great Flood. From that flood he pulled one study, then another, then around 30 of them. Each step let go of a little more of the world. Composition 7 was built the same way. It began as a painting called All Saints' Day. Then came an Angel of the Last Judgment, the same angel carried over, only stripped of detail. Then a full Last Judgment. Every version keeps the shapes of the one before it, but blurs them, drops the detail. Each moves one more step from the scene towards pure force. And none of these were sketches. Each one ran close to a meter across. Why go to all that trouble? Because Kandinsky believed a shape already makes a sound, not the color on it, the shape itself. He could say that because the psychologists of his day had just shown it. Music moves your mood. A line moves your mood. A rising composition and a falling one are felt in the body as 2 different feelings. Before you name a single thing, take a square. It just sits there, static, calm. Take a triangle with a sharp point and it turns aggressive. But a shape never works alone. Put cool blue or green inside a circle, and the calm only deepens. Put fierce orange or red inside a sharp triangle and the tension climbs, all the way to something like rage. And color, for him, worked like a piano. The color is the key. Your eye is the hammer. Your soul is the piano. The painter is the hand, pressing one key after another to set the soul vibrating. So he asks something strange of you. Stand in front of the painting and stay. Stay long enough that the room falls away and the edges of your sight go dark. Long enough that nothing is left but this color, this shape, working on you directly. That is where he wanted you, inside it. Now, stand in front of Composition 6. It hangs in the Hermitage, and the first thing you feel is something dark, something heavy. It is full of collisions, light against dark, one thing set hard against its opposite. The cold colors carry the raw force of nature, the water. The warm colors carry what is alive, human, bodily. He set them at each other's throats. That fight is the deluge. But he did not paint how a flood looks. He painted how it feels from far above. Picture yourself lifted off the earth, watching the flood from space. Do you see a single drowning man? No. Only forces, one fighting for life, the other taking it. This is the flood seen through the eyes of gods, where a human being is just one sound among many. The highest tragedy, he said, hides under the greatest cold. So if you look and cannot find the flood in there, good, you are not meant to find it. Kandinsky stripped out the selfish human way of looking, the one that catches maybe a third of what is real, and it lies to you about the rest. He is not asking your eyes to recognize a scene. He is asking the rest of you to feel it. And that feeling comes out roughly the same in all of us. Now look at the second one, Composition 7, in the Tretiakov Gallery. And it feels like Christmas. Carousels, candy, a party. But this is the last judgment, the end of everything, and Kandinsky is cheering. He was a theosophist, and to him, an apocalypse held no horror. A catastrophe is only how mankind crosses over, out of the kingdom of matter, into the kingdom of the spirit, and he believed it was starting now in his own century. He cheered the Russian Revolution as exactly that crossing. So what he paints here is a festival of the soul. This is why he reached for abstraction at all. A painting of real things could not hold what he cared about: God, the absolute, the ideas of theosophy. So abstraction became his religious painting. The old Russian icon carried the divine in a language of signs. Kandinsky built a sign language of his own, out of line and shape and color, and here is the key to reading any of it. First, your own feeling. Only then the shapes, the lines, the color. Never the other way around. Kandinsky went looking for God in his storm of color. But he was not the only one hunting. In Holland, a far quieter man was chasing the same God, and he thought he could catch it in a single straight line. In Holland, another painter with farther geometric abstraction, Piet Mondrian, he painted Dutch fields, flat water, a windmill against the sky, the same country over and over until he saw the trick hiding under all of it. Every one of those landscapes was built the same way, one vertical crossing one horizontal, nothing more. The turn came in 1909. Mondrian joined the Theosophical Society, and from that day he was hunting a new language for painting. Theosophy was not a religion and not a philosophy. It was a synthesis. Eastern teachings, threads of Buddhism and Hinduism, Christian motifs bolted onto the science of the day. Where science fell silent, theosophy began to speak. So he went back to his own landscapes and read them like evidence. The horizontal of the shore, the vertical thrown up by a mill, in his own words, observing the sea, the sky, the stars and the trees, he understood their plastic force. He could express it through a series of vertical and horizontal crossing lines. The country dissolved, the line stayed. And the two lines were not equal. The vertical was the masculine principle, he said, the trees of the forest standing up. The horizontal was the feminine, the endless line of the sea, and where they met, balance. From that one crossing he pulled the whole world, up and down, left and right, good and evil, black and white, woman and man, the frame under everything. Here is the part that matters. Mondrian did not invent these oppositions. He spied them in nature and carried them into paint. And did he find anything new? My reading is no. 1,000 years of religious art had already lived by the same pairs. Good and evil, heaven and hell, the saved and the damned. He only stripped them bare. It took him almost 10 years to build the style that could hold that. By 1917 he had it, and he gave it a Dutch name, the style, and his own word, neoplasticism. New painting, art, he said, stands above reality and has nothing to do with it. So strip reality out. No birds, no people. Leave only the pure formula. Now look at one. A big red square high on the canvas. There is no symmetry anywhere in it, and yet it holds perfectly still. Feel how it balances. The red is answered by a smaller yellow and by two rectangles that together make a third square. Symmetry? None. Balance? Complete. For Mondrian, that word carried everything. And only 3 colors: yellow, red, blue. Never pink, never green. Those carry a mood, my mood, and the picture about the universe cannot hold one person's feeling. Color here has to be free of the self. It should speak only of a single, all-embracing calm. Nothing borrowed from mood, nothing borrowed from me. Black and white are not even colors. They are the absence of color. And everyone is painted by hand. It looks machined, but the ruler was his eye. One rule under all of it. The right angle, 90 degrees. Strict, vertical and horizontal, most of it cut by the golden section. In his Theosophy circle sat a mathematician hunting the exact formula of the absolute. Maybe that is where his love of the exact came from. He kept revising them. By the 30s the right angle held, but the diagonal cut in, the square tipped onto its corner. He was fanatical about precision. On the back he wrote up down, left right, so the diamond would hang true. But a painting on a gallery wall was not enough for him. If you want to change how a person sees the world, one glance is a single injection. He wanted a constant one, so the painting had to come home, and not one painting, the whole house filled with it. Is art in your house, on your chair, in your teacup, reshaping you while you are not looking? And there was a harder reason. After the First War, people bought far fewer paintings. The money was gone. So his group, the Still, went into the house itself. If you cannot bring a canvas in, build the room so the room raises a new kind of person. Cafes, chairs, whole interiors. A chair that became famous? One you would know on sight. In New York today, even the pastries are cut this way. The same thing happened in Russia. When the big canvases stopped selling, the women around Malevich printed his designs onto headscarves. Alexandra Exter came to Moscow in the 20s and loved it. Ordinary women wearing Malevich on a scarf. The new world. Then the Second War drove him out of Europe, to America in the 1940s, and New York changed the formula. The colors stopped filling the boxes and became the lines themselves, running yellow and red and blue across the white. You can hear it. Syncopation, jazz, Broadway in the grid. His last canvas he left unfinished. In 1944, it was gone. So that is neoplasticism. One universal formula. The right angle, the binary pairs, the 3 colors, no symmetry and yet full balance. Meant to hold ideal art, theosophy, and the whole frame of the world at once. Both of these men bet their whole lives on one idea, that a painting could carry you back to God. It could show you the frame of the universe, but that dream was already dying, and that is the next turn of this story. 1944. Both men who built abstraction die in the same year. Kandinsky in Paris, Mondrian in New York. But their paintings are already hanging on American walls, and the young country stands in front of them for the first time and meets a kind of art it has never seen. One name rises above the rest here. Mark Rothko, born in the Russian Empire, carried to America as a child. He studied at a theater school, and the first thing he ever painted was scenery for the stage. but the paint itself caught him and he decided to do nothing else. His first canvases come at the end of the 1930s. You can still see Europe in them. Surrealism here, expressionism there, and that is no accident. In those years, the surrealists and the expressionists were fleeing Europe for America, bringing their paintings with them. So Americans saw the new painting in the flesh. Those early ones look like subway stations. And how far is a subway station from pure abstraction? You just take the figures out. What stays is an arrangement of shapes and color. Henri Matisse had already gone there. Look at his red interior. It is almost an abstract painting because what he cares about is the color, not the things in the room. Rothko taught painting to children, and he noticed something. Children begin with color, not with a shape, not with a thing, with color, and he said the grown-ups should learn it back. Paint with color, walk away from the picture of a thing. By the late 1940s, he's making his first abstractions, the multiforms. By the early 1950s, fields of pure color. Rothko cannot be explained. He has to be seen. The first time I stood in front of a real one, 3 colors and nothing else, it frightened me. Genuinely frightened me. The color reaches something underthought, and you cannot argue with it. And it looks simple. These are not clean colors, every one is a mixture, and the whole painting lives in the passage from one to the next. Sometimes the edge is razor sharp, sometimes it is smeared into a breath. Try it yourself, move from a yellow into a gold into a white and keep it beautiful. Almost no one can. You will never see one Rothko alone. There is always a whole series. He painted in series, and he showed them in series. One series was born for a restaurant. The Seagram murals, painted for the Four Seasons in New York. The fee was enormous. It made him one of the richest painters alive. Then he went to eat there with his wife, looked around the room and hated it. So he gave the money back and kept the paintings. They were not going to hang over anyone's dinner. Instead, he found a curator at the Tate, and together they built a room. It is still called the Rothko room. Every painting hangs at a height he fixed, at a distance he fixed, from the floor and from each other. Even the benches sit exactly where he wanted them. Why benches? Because Rothko said you should sit in front of his paintings until you weep, until the tears come. You do not have to cry, but you have to stay long, so your legs give up before your attention does. And in the low light, the colors begin to shimmer and swim at the edge of your eye. He wanted more than a room. He wanted a chapel in every state, 50 of them. Only one was ever built in Houston to his own design. No windows in the walls. The light falls only from above, thin and gray like an overcast afternoon that never changes. It's not a church. No service will ever be held there. But you can sit and meditate, or come for a concert, or a night of poetry. The woman who paid for it described the paintings in one line. A night in which dawn is beginning to break. The darkest hour, just before the fear lets go. Rothko drew the parallel himself. 14 paintings, he said, for the 14 stations of the cross, black on black. And the longer you sit, the less it stays, one black. Shimmers rise, and the single dark opens into many colors hiding inside it. To join shades of black so they hold together is a thing very few painters can do. But notice what he never promised, not God. Kandinsky and Mondrian believed a painting could remake the human being. By the second half of the century, that dream was dead. Rothko only said his work could lead you to yourself. And because he cared so fiercely about how a painting hangs, and from where you meet it, people call him the father of installation. And he would not paint people. After the horrors of the century, he thought the human being had no right to be inside a picture at all. Rothko was a Jew, and he lives through everything happening in Europe, in Germany, with terrible pain. After Auschwitz, the line goes, "You cannot write poetry." So Rothko wanted you still, silent, seated until you wept. The other American hero wanted the exact opposite. He wanted to climb inside the paint and thrash. When Jackson Pollock was a boy, his family kept moving him across America. Out west, he met the world of the people who were there first. He watched a Navajo shaman dance. In the dance, the shaman poured a picture straight onto the ground, a mandala of colored sand. And he made it for someone dying, or seriously ill, or already gone, when it was time to say goodbye. That boy grew into the hero of American painting. Rothko mattered, but Rothko never became the legend. Pollock did. And I would go further. He did not just become a hero. He became something close to a saint. His life story was built for it, on purpose. From the plain American family he was born into, to those childhood roads through Indian country. His first paintings look like American folk art, closer to a cheap popular print than to a museum. Flat sign language, totem birds, a male shape and a female shape spelled out in pure geometry. It is the visual world of the Native Americans he grew up beside, and it binds him to them. He knew their forms closely. The tattoo art of the Haida, and above everything else, the sand painting of the Navajo. The Navajo gave him two things. First, a way to move. He would work like that shaman, circling the picture, dancing it into being, making it happen rather than composing it. Second, a way to load the paint. He started grinding stone, sand, and broken glass into it, so the surface itself carried grit, texture, and weight. There was another pressure under all of this. Pollock drank badly, and he was seeing a therapist for it. The therapist told him something simple. Paint. Throw the energy out through the work, get it onto the canvas instead of into the bottle, and reach for the bottle less. So the surrealists were doubly his people. They dug into the unconscious, into psychoanalysis, the same buried room his therapist kept pointing at. And that buried room was exactly what he wanted to get onto canvas. Out of all of it came a new kind of abstraction, and it has a name, gesture painting, or painting made by dripping. Drip, in his language, means to fling something, to throw the paints down. The nickname came fast. There was Jack the Ripper. Now there was Jack the Dripper. And the pun had teeth. He thus slit the picture open the way that other Jack worked and let the inside spill out onto the floor. One of my own students once explained his genius to me. The proof, she said, was the sheer number of kilograms of paint he threw at the canvas. And there I had nothing left to say. She completely disarmed me. But she was not entirely wrong. There is an enormous amount of paint here. The thing is physically heavy. And that raises a strange problem, one older painting never had. When do you stop? You can keep flinging paint for years. The picture just keeps growing, in time and in space, and no moment ever arrives to tell you it is finished. Pollock was one of the first painters anyone filmed at work, and when people watched the footage, something turned over in them. The making of the picture was as alive as the picture itself. Maybe more alive. The process stopped being the means to the painting and became the thing worth looking at. Because watch how he works. Before him, a canvas stood upright on an easel and the painter faced it. Like a window. Pollock lays it flat on the floor and steps on. He works it from all four sides. He lives inside it. There is no top, no bottom, no left, no right. The old picture, with its frame around the window, is simply gone. And this is what the dripping is for. It lets the unconscious out. The canvas becomes a recording, a track of the biological pulses running through him at that exact second. Agitated, and the paint flies in nervous, whipping lines. Calm, near a trance, and it lands in heavy, slow slaps. He is the shaman again, bent over the sand, only now the mandala is his own. So think back for a moment. Kandinsky and Mondrian were painting the foundations of the universe, the deep order under everything. None of that is here. If the painting is no longer God, whose soul is on the canvas now? His own. Raw ego, unconscious, Uncontrolled, a nervous system left running with the lid off. Pure private ego dripped onto the floor. So why in 1949 did a government spy agency start shipping it around the planet? 1949, a government spy agency starts paying for one painter's shows. The CIA begins funding Jackson Pollock's exhibitions quietly and sending his work out into the world, canvases into the Soviet Union, canvases across Europe. The splashes of house paint that had dripped onto a studio floor were suddenly crossing borders, and someone in Washington was covering the shipping bill. So why would spies care about drips of paint? Because of what stood on the other side of them. In the Soviet Union, the official style was socialist realism, art bent to serve the state, and only that. In Europe too, painting was drifting back toward the realistic, toward the recognizable. And Pollock's abstraction answered none of it. It stood against all of it. 1959, Moscow, an American exhibition in Sokolniki Park. Pollock is on the wall. De Kooning hangs right beside him, and a Soviet reporter walks the room and laughs the paintings off it. "Look what they brought us from America," he writes. Then he turns to his readers. "Now compare that to our own socialist painting." The abstraction was a joke to him, and he printed it as one. But cross to Washington, and the same canvases meant something that reporter never saw. "Here is real freedom," they said. "Here are the real values of a democracy. The painter does whatever he wants, however he wants, and answers to no one. Over there, art is clamped down. Art is something the state owns." A drip painting had become an argument about who a man is allowed to be. So the same painting said two opposite things at once. In Moscow, a reporter laughed them off the wall. In Washington, they meant one clean thing. A free man does whatever he wants and no state gets to tell him how. And at home, Pollock was loved for a second reason. A stranger one. Look at what else America was making in the 50s. Pop art. And pop art is reproduction art. Printed, stamped, multiplied, rolling out like cans of a factory line, the same image again and again, with nothing underneath it. Take Warhol. We still cannot say for certain what his own hands actually made. His mother signed the works. His studio produced them. So the thing we used to call the original, the author's own copy, simply dissolves. There is nothing left to point at and say, "That one, he made that." And the painter's autograph goes with it. The one hand that made one thing and signed it and meant it. That whole idea starts to vanish because everything now comes off a machine. Art is turned out on a conveyor, the same way cars are, the same way anything is. So look back at Pollock's floor. Remember what I told you those drifts were, a private ego flowing straight out onto the canvas. One man and nothing between him and the paint, which makes his abstraction something else entirely, the last author's copy in the history of art, the last real signature of a painter, one human hand against the whole world of printed pictures. So everyone who feared for the fate of painting lined up behind him, Pollock on one side, the printing press on the other. The machine age was busy erasing the artist's hand from everything it touched. And it would take the darkest subject of the century to prove why one kind of painting still refused to let go of the human. Gerhard Richter had a set of photographs taken inside Birkenau, made by the prisoners themselves. He studied them for a long time, and at first they felt almost calm, peaceful even. It looked like men in a yard, raking fallen leaves into a little pile. They were not leaves. What the prisoners had photographed was a pit. Men dragging bodies to the edge and throwing them in. People who had just been killed in the gas chambers. Only later did Richter understand what he was looking at, and then he tried to paint it. But to see why that painting had to be destroyed before he could say anything, step back from the pit for a moment. Look at where the whole century of painting had arrived by then, because something had quietly changed in what art was even for. In the second half of the 20th century, the painters walk away from something. They stopped treating art as metaphysics. They stopped treating it as a spiritual road that is meant to lead you to some kind of enlightenment. No more painting the foundations of the world. That whole mission is simply set down. This is not art getting worse. I want to be clear about that. The world changes, the ideas change, and the painting changes with them. What it means is this: the utopia that possessed the painters at the start of the century is now seen for what it was, a utopia. Nobody, not Pollock, not Rothko, is trying to lead you to God anymore. And the world itself keeps getting more tangled, more complicated. So complicated that you almost cannot reflect it in a painting at all. There is simply too much of it now to fit inside a frame. So what happens to Pollock's idea after Pollock? It does not die. Take Willem de Kooning, his contemporary, who lived all the way to 1997 and kept working in that same abstract expressionist language. But where Pollock threw his whole self onto the canvas, de Kooning took that part out. His paintings are more decorative. Just paint, tossed onto the surface. Pollock you can barely keep in your house. He presses on you. De Kooning you can hang over the couch. Colored patches, no deep content. Decoration for the wall. Same movement, opposite weight. And that contrast is the whole point, because there is another man on that same line who went the other way entirely. Richter comes out of the same abstract expressionism, and he is still alive today. But his painting is loaded with meaning. He is German, born in East Germany, trained in the West, and he carries, like all Germans carry, the heavy guilt of fascism and the war. That is the man standing in front of those photographs. For Richter, abstraction was never the goal. It was a consequence. He has many series, made in different years, and almost all of them come back to the same place. Birkenau, the camps. He did not set out to paint abstractly. He arrived there. So watch how he got there. He started with figurative paintings. He copied what the photograph showed straight onto the canvas, exactly as it was. But when the works were finished, he saw the problem. They carried none of the emotion he actually felt. He painted the horror plainly, and the paintings said nothing. So he began to work back into them. He scraped the paint off, laid it on again, pushed it harder in one place, deformed it, scraped it back, laid it on once more. And somewhere inside that scraping, the abstraction of the Birkenau series appeared. Because you cannot carry pain, drama, real suffering by painting the scene itself. You have to carry the emotion. And here, the emotion comes from the colors fighting each other and from the way the paint is dragged across the canvas. A kind of grinding of paint on cloth, like the grinding of teeth. Like the whole hell of that place, forced into the surface. And there is one thing you'll never find in these paintings. A human figure. Remember Rothko, no strength left even to raise a hand. Richter is saying the same thing. In that hell, a person is simply not worthy of being shown. After that, no face belongs on the canvas. And abstraction stopped being a style at all. It had become a language, and everyone began to speak it. Look at this altar. It has been shot, not with bullets, with paint. A French artist, Niki de Saint-Palais, built a white shrine, half Christian, half ancient. Then she left it looking like it had faced a firing squad, dripping black, artistic terrorism, done in paint. Why would anyone shoot an altar? Because of a language. When abstraction arrived, nothing around it could stay silent. The Dadaists and the Surrealists picked up its grammar and used it to say completely different things. And once everything nearby had dissolved into abstraction, painting a plain, solid object became almost impossible. The pool was everywhere. So abstraction stopped being a picture at all. It turned into a tool, a language you could build a performance or an installation out of. Alan Caprow watched Pollock fling paint across the floor and drew one conclusion. If the action is the art, you can throw away the painting and keep only the action. So he did. Performance was born, with no picture left in it. Rothko went the other way. The way he approached his own paintings would push the next generation of artists towards something else entirely. The installation. Now back to that altar and its date, 1968. Prague Spring. Paris students tearing up the streets. Niki de Saint-Palais hated power, hated the church, hated every institution the state could raise. Neither God nor king, as the old French line goes. She needed none of them. Here is her own logic. Without art, she said, she would have been a terrorist, out on the street killing people. Nothing satisfied her, not the church, not the politicians, not the shape of the state. Art kept her inside the line. It let her fire the idea and still leave everyone, herself included, alive and free. That is what the paint was for. Niki aimed at the heart. Others aimed lower, straight at the retina. The op art painters looked at all this difficult, aching art and asked a blunt question. Why so hard? Art should be simple, they said. Open to everyone, no cultured eye and no clever mind required. Their bet was not on the heart, not on the brain, but on the eye. And the eye plays fair. Stand in front of one of these grids, and your gaze catches a shimmer that is not really there. A bulge here, a hollow there. Every viewer on Earth sees the bulge in the same place, the hollow in the same place. There is no other way to see it. That is simply how the human eye works. So abstraction never left. It leaked into everything, into the minimalists, into every direction art took in the second half of the century. It just stopped wearing its own name. Then there's James Turrell, still alive, still showing. He makes installations out of light and he teases the minimalists. They insist a minimal object must be iron, concrete, something heavy and industrial. Turrell built his out of light instead, glowing cubes, geometric shapes of pure glow. But shape a cube out of light and color and you are trespassing on something far older, on classical painting itself. Take Van Eyck's Madonna of Chancellor Rollin. The figures have weight, modeled in light and shadow. The room has depth, laid out by one-point perspective, every line running back to a single spot on the horizon. Near things are painted warm, the far hills cool into a distant blue, and the whole picture is an invitation. Come in. Each figure turns inward and beckons you deeper from the front of the scene into its distance. But you cannot actually do it. You will never find your way inside the frame. You can only stand there and take the walk in your head. This is the oldest limit in painting, and Turrell decided to push right through it. He plays with these very parameters and asks the question out loud. What if we really could step inside? So he answers it. Not an illusion of depth this time, but real space, filled with light and color. Painting in 3 dimensions. Look at the soft lavender field glowing on a wall. You climb a few stairs, reach out to touch it, and fall straight through. It was never a projection. It is real space, waiting there in the depth, quietly inviting you in. He builds pools too, basins of salt water lit from inside. Float in one and your body turns light, almost weightless. And Turrell wonders, step into a painting by Rembrandt, by Caravaggio, by Van Eyck, and maybe it would feel exactly like this. Utterly bodiless. His real subject was never only light. It is space and above all the feeling of your own body. Op art played with the eye alone. Turrell plays with perception itself, in time and in space. One of them asked the oldest question of painting out loud. What if you could actually walk into the picture? Step through with me and let me answer the one we started with. So one of them lets you walk straight in. That is where the whole century of abstraction had been pointing. And after all the noise, the grids, the drips, the color that swallowed the room, it was only ever 2 things. 2 roads running side by side for 100 years. Called in the grid and the storm. The grid is geometric abstraction, clean shape, flat field, an order you could measure. A storm is painterly abstraction, the one they also call abstract expressionism, gesture, weather, a canvas that looks like it happened to itself. In post-war America, both roads kept running. On the storm side, Pollock crouched over a canvas on the floor, flinging paint at it. On the grit side, Rothko and the color fields, great soft walls of a single color you stand in front of and sink into. Then, in the 1960s, something strange happened. Abstraction stopped being a style you signed up for. It became a language. Conceptual artists reach for it. Performance artists reach for it. Performance artists reach for it. None of them were pure abstractionists. They just used the language when they needed it. Line up the names and they sort themselves. The grid, Malevich, Mondrian, Rothko, and Terrell, the one who built you a room to walk into. The storm, Kandinsky, who lit the fuse. Then Pollock, then de Kooning, and Richter, still at the easel. But why did it matter so much to the people who made it? One reason under all the rest. Freedom. Total freedom. At the level of emotion, of feeling, of idea, you paint however you want. And the part that matters most, you paint about whatever you want. For some, that freedom became a road to the sacred. The early ones at the start of the 20th century saw abstraction as a way back, a way to return a person to God, or a way to show the bare foundations of the world, the thing under the thing. Then, in the second half of the century, it turns hard. Now abstraction is a projection of your own self, your unconscious, your private ideas. Or it is an ethical choice, because after the war you could not put a human being on a canvas anymore. You could not speak of fair ladies and knights and beautiful things, not after what happens. So you turn to abstraction out of conscience. Beauty's gone, and if you still want to say something beautiful, this is the only way left to say it. That idea is still alive, especially in Europe. In Germany most of all, where the war is not over inside people and the guilt gets worked out right here on the canvas. So the picture with nothing in it. Here is what was inside it all along. A flood seen from where God stands. A last judgment thrown like a carnival. A screen that no face could hold. The painters took the story out so you would stop reading and start feeling. So walk up to the one hanging near you. Do not look for what it shows. Stand still. Let your eyes go quiet until the edges of the room drop away and only the color is left. Feel it first. The meaning comes after that, or it does not come at all. And that is allowed. Abstraction is not chaos, and it is not a con. It is the most honest thing a painter can do. Hand you the raw color and the raw feeling, keep nothing back, and trust you to stand still long enough to receive it. And if this is your kind of thing, subscribe.